All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. It is the Paul Harrell program, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, and we appreciate you guys being with us. We want to talk now with our good friend. We got Donnie Copeland, a former state representative. He is on the phone line with us. Donnie, welcome back to the program, sir.
Hey, Paul, how we doing, man?
Man, I'm doing fantastic. Doing fantastic. How have you been doing? I mean, you know, the special session's
doing
over.
Great.
Yeah, you doing good? Okay,
doing
good.
Great. I really enjoyed the time we got to spend on the radio together up there at the Marble Palace, but it's good to be on the phone with you.
Yeah, I did as well. Have you been following the news any with this the task force, the task force, and if so, what are your hopes? What are your hopes? What are your dreams?
Well, I happen to know most, if not 98% of the people that are on those two tasks or on the task force between the House and the Senate. And, it's actually pretty simple, Paul. 1 + 1 is 2. You can't spend more money than you make. And you can look at all the tax cuts you want, and we're all for them. But at some point, you got to cut the size of government. And taxes will take care of themselves if you'll do two things: quit spending money, cut the size of government, and give that money that you save back to the people. That's a tax cut.
Now,
and till that happens, we can circle this wagon. We can figure and cipher and do all that we want to do. But the bottom line is you've got to cut the size of government. And this governor, for the last 3 years, has not been willing to do that.
No, you're exactly right. Increases in spending, every year until he recently ran out of room and he had to actually cut spending. Matter of fact, we got to phrase this correctly because I'm going to fall into the trap here. It's actually a cut in an increase. He's still increasing spending. You see all these news with all the cuts that are going on. Matter of fact, in this Michael Wickline article, where I cannot believe, by the way, they actually said that Jonathan Dismang offered a position on this committee to Jake Files and he declined. Still can't believe that happened in light of everything.
Jake was a little busy.
Yeah, he's a little busy, and now he's a solar panel consultant now for some Texas company. So I'm sure we're all going to be voting on solar special session next week for solar panels in every home or something like that. But Jim Hendren, Senator Jim Hendren, he's quoted in this Wickline article today. Hendren said he's optimistic that individual income taxes can be cut by closing loopholes, removing exemptions, and simplifying the tax code, but it's going to be a challenge. Quote, I don't think you will see us do anything to put us in a budget crisis, Hendren said. Hendren, a nephew of the governor, said the tax code, quote, needs a tremendous amount of work no matter if the state had a $70 million budget cut or a $300 million surplus. So with that last line of the article, you get the feeling that they are embracing this cut from an increase in spending as somehow something conservative. Jim Hendren seems to be embracing what Dismang said, what Hendren said, that they don't have a spending problem, they have a revenue problem.
Yeah. And it's the trap that every person in the audience, and we all know that's lived any amount of time in our lives, we know this all too well. It's the old saying goes, it's not how much money you make, it's how much you keep. And we have a spending problem in Arkansas. When you have more employees per capita than the state of California,
that's a problem.
You've got a spending problem. When you've got 60, 70,000 employees for a state of 3 million people, it's just unbelievable. And so you that needs to be half that. I talked to the head at the time when I was in the legislature, the head of the State Employees Association, and we could cut the size of government by first cutting we lose about 5% of our employees a year, state employees, who retire, pass away, get another job. Just by not replacing them and getting creative and getting innovative, we could cut that by 20% every 4 years.
Yeah.
And so there's so much room. And if you've been in the legislature, there's so much fat. 7 and 8 superintendents per school district. I mean, they're up to their wazoo and superintendents, assistant superintendents, and vice superintendents, and there's all kind of fat in every department, in every agency, and that's what they ought to be meeting about, is cutting the size of government. That's how George Bush got in trouble. He cut taxes and didn't cut the size of government.
Yeah, and
he
grew it more than any president before him.
Yeah, we ought to be working on getting rid of the used car tax. We ought to be getting rid of the what is this personal property tax and all these taxes that Bill Clinton. But we can't do that because, or we won't do that because the governor and the legislature is afraid to cut the size.
Well, they're afraid of this. You hate roads and you hate school children. You can't cut property taxes.
And don't forget the military. We hate veterans too.
You hate the troops. You hate the troops. I want to talk about some of your former colleagues here who are on this task force. And look, let me reiterate this. I hope I'm wrong. I hope they actually cut the size of government. I hope they reject revenue-neutral tax, quote, revenue-neutral tax cuts. And I hope they actually lift the burden off of the people of Arkansas and shrink the size of government. I hope that I'm wrong, but from now, I'm just going by past experiences. We're calling it the task force. All right. So let's start at the top. The Joint Budget Co-Chairman, State Representative Lane Jean, a Republican from Magnolia. Okay.
Okay.
So I wanted to go over how they voted on some of the big issues that you and I talked about so many times down at the Marble Palace. So Republican Lane Jean on this task force, he did not vote on the tire tax bill. Okay, so that was an increase in tire taxes and a new tire tax. He's listed as non-voting. He voted for the gas tax hike scam that would have put, I believe, a dishonest title on the ballot that would have tricked the people of Arkansas. Voted for that. He was present on the military tax cut shell game that increased taxes and created the digital downloads tax. And he did vote no on the internet sales tax SB 140. So kind of a mixed bag there. What are your thoughts?
Well,
Lane.
Lane.
Yeah, Lane.
Lane. And now I'm going to say he's my good friend. I can't pronounce his name. Lane is actually and I are very close, and so I want to make a full disclosure there. We talk pretty often. Here is Lane's issue. Lane is at the heart. He is a bedrock conservative. Here's his problem. He's a super nice guy. He keeps wanting to give the governor
the benefit of the doubt, I guess.
Benefit of the doubt. Now, I'll tell you, I've watched him do it. I've been in the speaker's office when he's done it. He will give them the what for, and then when they end up doing something else, as you see in his voting record, sometimes he goes along, sometimes he
doesn't. Yeah,
not. He won't, and they know it why he voted president, and then sometimes he just stands his ground and votes no.
Yeah.
So I know, but again, we want people that will. Lane knows what to do. He's a businessman. He's very successful, and he knows what they're doing. They're just not willing to cut the size of government. There's not a better guy, and I don't know who all was on there. I can't remember everybody. There's not a better one on there that would give me hope than Lane Jean.
That's encouraging, Donnie. That's encouraging to hear. We're talking with former state representative Donnie Copeland. But here's the whole thing. Last week we talked about how some state senators correctly pointed out there's a huge trust gap going on. Alan Clark was one of them. Senator Jason Rapert was another. That hey, there's just a lot of people that don't trust the governor. And I have to say, after thinking about that, Bob Ballinger, State Representative Bob Ballinger, he voted for the $105 million, transfer and everything else. And he went down on the floor and he said, "I'm sticking my neck out here, Governor. I'm trusting you, Governor."
My neck out.
And I was talking with a state representative today off the record, and this state representative said, "If you have to say that from the House floor." There really is a huge trust gap between the conservative limited government legislators and Asa Hutchinson. I mean, and I didn't think about it, but if you have to go down and call out the Republican governor and say, "I'm trusting you not to spend this money. I'm sticking my neck out," My goodness. I completely
You're
missed that.
so right. What a great point by your conversation there. Let me say this, that the problem is a lot of those guys, and Lane, I would say, is much more an exception, that because he will stand his ground. I've seen him, like I said before, and then there's times he'll vote on something, and I've seen him vote for something for them because he's part of leadership, which I don't agree with, and I've told him that, to go along, to be a part of it. But I'm going to tell you, man, so many of those guys want better. They just want strong leadership. They're just not going to go against the governor. And it just drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Because I respect the office. I respect, if it were Governor Beebe, if it was anybody else, I would still respect them even though I didn't agree with them. But I'm still not going to vote for things that I know go against the principles of the people that put us in office.
Yeah.
And that's the difference in me, and that's probably why I'm sitting here talking to you on the phone and not in some committee.
Unfortunately, I would agree with you there. Okay, so the next Republican on this task force, we got Representative Matthew Pitch, a Republican from Fort Smith. He voted for the tire tax increase and the new tire tax. That's HB 1267. He voted for the gas tax scam, HB 1726. He voted for the military tax cut / shell game, and a lot of them did. I mean, a lot of them did, but that increased taxes on soda candy, digital downloads because we couldn't absorb $13 million. And he voted yes on the internet sales tax that thankfully failed, SB 140. So, I mean, he's agreed with all of their revenue gathering schemes so far. I'm kind of doubtful that he's going to want to actually shrink government to free up, more money that the people can keep. What do you think?
Yeah, and Matt is one of the probably sharpest, smartest men down there. Super businessman, engineer by training. Great guy off the floor. He's just super guy. But when Matt got down there, he got in the leadership track. He and Bob Ballinger, if you remember, were vying for a majority leader. Now you look at it, and it was two peas in a pod. Matt's going to go along with what the governor wants, and you keep, I know, tongue in cheek, kind of saying tax farce, but really it is, because it's all Obama-esque, blue ribbon panel. It's all dog and pony show, folks. This is not hard. It's tough. It's tough to say we're going to cut 30% of the government, and we're going. But here's what the cool part: when you do that, you put all that money back in people's pockets, and they spend it, and they invest it, and they're just not willing. The governor's not willing to go big. He's just not. He's never going to go big. He never has. He is timid. He is scared, and that's why he kept Obamacare. He's scared, and he's not going to go big. And he's got people around him that are good men, and they're not going to, and good women. They're not going to fight him. Some of them put up a little bit of a fight first few years and rattled a sword or two, and now they're in line, unfortunately. And Matt's a great guy, but he's not going to go against.
Well, and
he's not going to go against.
And
them.
as I'm looking at these voting records, I feel the need. I get a point out. If you go down the list, Democrat Bob Johnson from Jacksonville, he's been put on the task force. Okay, he did not vote on the tire tax, so he just didn't vote. He was present on the gas tax scam. He voted for the military tax cut shell game, and he voted yes on the internet sales tax. And I guess the exercise here is, let's compare these Republican voting records on these big issues. There's no difference. That's exactly right. For the most part, there's not much difference. And yet
now,
we're going to have
microcosm, but when you look at it from a macro viewpoint, there's been no difference. I mean, as a whole, there really hasn't been. But go ahead. I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, that's exactly my point. It's you want we're going into this. Their rhetoric, their carefully crafted language is, we're going to have to make these tough choices. Well, I mean, you look at how they came down on what I think were pretty big issues in the last session, and that's how we take money from the people, or this giant quest for more and more revenue. It's like this, this odyssey. They just, we've got to find more revenue from the people. And yet you look at the Democrats and the Republicans, and a lot of the Republicans went ahead and voted. They couldn't see, what, I don't want veterans to be used as a way to raise taxes elsewhere. And I support the troops, but I don't want to create new taxes on digital downloads, and be accused of hating the troops. You know what I mean? It just goes to show you that like you said, there's just not much difference. And there ought to be, if we're going to be discussing these giant ideas. I don't have a lot of confidence based on their voting record, in this last session.
The sad part. Bob used to be a Republican. He was a JP out of that Jacksonville area. He voted with the Democrats as much as he did the Republicans. And finally, somebody said, Bob will jokingly tell you the story. He said, everybody said, "Man, you vote so much for the Democrats, you ought to become one." He did, and so but even with him with the D beside his name, there's not a huge amount of difference in his voting record. And I would say at least, what would you say, half to 2/3 of the Republicans down there have about the Democrats, and 2/3 of the Republicans have about the same voting record. Am I about right?
Yeah, from what I can tell, yeah.
I mean, there's not a lot of difference. If you look a lot, I think if you went back, you could find very few times where a Republican governor's agenda got as many votes as he did from Democrats. Why? Because, 8 of them were either tax or fee increases.
Yeah.
So that's what Democrats do.
Yeah.
And obviously now that's what Republicans do. Here's the real sad part to me, Paul, and to your listeners. Here's the saddest part, is I know those people, a lot of those people you called, and it's quite uncomfortable for me, but it's okay. That's why I'm here, to call an ace an ace. But it's really uncomfortable for me to comment because they're my former colleagues. I love them like brothers, but it is what it is. And you asked me the question, I'm going to be honest with you. But here's the real shame. If you had a governor who would walk in there and say, guys, I want to cut the size of government this year by 25%, and I'm going to put, I'm going to put 20% of that savings into roads, and the 80% of it is going back to the taxpayers, or 10% to the roads, 10% to rainy day fund, a real rainy day fund.
Yeah, something. I mean, something.
And 80% of it's going back to the taxpayer. Those people would be giddy. They would do it, and that's the real shame.
They would. You're exactly right.
And so what we have to do is play all these games and to act like we're lowering taxes. We're lowering them over here for veterans, but we're raising them 7 other places, and then we're calling people out and saying they hate the military because they call you out on it.
Donnie,
and so that's the biggest shame of all to me.
Donnie, let me interrupt you real quick. We have breaking news. The Associated Press is reporting that Donald Trump has fired the FBI director, James Comey. In a statement, Trump
praise the Lord.
In a statement, Trump says that Comey's firing, quote, will make a new beginning for the FBI. The White House says the search for a new FBI director will begin immediately. Comey's firing comes days after he testified on Capitol Hill about the FBI's investigation into Russia's election meddling, possible connections between the Russia and Trump campaign. I thought this would happen earlier, but I will tell you, Donnie, just real quick, we got to go to break, but I'll get your response on this. The left is going to go crazy. The left is going to go absolutely
we need
nuts.
Tongue depressors for all the media, for sure.
Yeah. Tongue depressors. All right, we appreciate it. Former State Representative Donnie Copeland, I appreciate it, sir. Thanks for coming on, sharing your thoughts with us today.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Thank you so much.
All right,
Bye-bye.
got to go to break, folks. Back in just a moment.